The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. My name is Dave Johnson, and I am the Area Manager for Fidelity National Title Insurance for the state of Illinois. This webinar will last for 1 hour, and if you are an attorney, you will receive 1 hour of CLE credit. This presentation will be kicked off by Patrick Quist. Patrick is Vice President and Director of Illinois and Indiana Governmental Relations for Fidelity National Title Group. Patrick will spend the first 30 minutes going over the background, the statutory sections, and the instructions for completing the disclosure of financial interest form. Next up on the agenda will be Kevin Giltmeyer, Assistant Vice President and Assistant Sales Manager. Kevin will be explaining our procedures and automation to facilitate the completion of the DS1 form. Lastly, there will be a question and answer segment monitored by DJ Johnson, Assistant Vice President and Assistant Sales Manager. DJ will be addressing the questions that you may ask during the presentation. The course evaluation form can be found in the handout section of your GoToMeeting screen. Please download all of the handouts during the presentation and email the completed questionnaire to ilsales@fnf.com. Also, please submit any questions you may have during the presentation. Without further ado, I will now turn this presentation over to Patrick. Please take it away, Pat.
Good afternoon. Want to start the presentation with a broad overview. I will touch on the statutory sections, relate those statutory sections to the requirements for a disclosure, and then go into the new disclosure form required effective March 1 and the instructions. Let me preface the discussion by pointing out that the requirements for issuing a disclosure are not new. They are over 30 years old. There is a current DS1 form that is required and will be required through March 1st. And then disclosures issued March 1st and on will require the new form. Very broadly, the statutory sections that relate to the requirements for the disclosure are encompassed in the Title Insurance Act, Section 18, Section 19, and the definitional sections. I'm going to touch in a lot of detail on Section 18. I want to point out Section 19 and the definitional sections. So Section 19 very broadly defines the charges that are to be included on the DS1 form. The definitional sections, which is Section 3 of the Act, define a producer of title business, an associate, and also financial interests. With regard to the definition of producer of title business, I just want to read that so everybody is clear on who may be a producer. So pursuant to Section 3, definition for producer of title business is any person, firm, partnership, association, corporation, or other legal entity engaged in this state in the trade, business, occupation, or profession of 1, buying or selling interest in real property, 2, making loans secured by interest in real property, or 3, acting as a broker, agent, attorney, or representative of natural persons or other legal entities that buy or sell interest in real property or that lend money with such interest as security. Again, very broadly, the definitional sections. What I want to focus on is Section 18 of the Act, because this sets a lot of the parameters for the DS1 or disclosure requirement. So generally, people ask, why is a disclosure required? Well, it's twofold. It's a combination of RESPA requirements and Illinois statutory requirements, particularly Section 18 of the Title Insurance Act. I'm going to use the term DS1 and disclosure somewhat interchangeably throughout the presentation. When is a DS form required pursuant to the Title Act? This is contained in the first paragraph, Section 18A. Application of this section is limited to residential properties of 4 or fewer units, at least one of which units is occupied or to be occupied by an owner, legal, or beneficial. So 5 or more residential units, commercial, industrial, no DS1 disclosures required. 4 or fewer units, and again, at least one of which units is occupied or to be occupied by an owner requires a disclosure, and again, a DS1 disclosure. When I'm talking about this DS1 disclosure, I'm only referring to the disclosure required pursuant to the Title Insurance Act. I'm not addressing any attorney requirements pursuant to the Code of Professional Responsibility that may require additional disclosures to your client. So here I am again just referring to the DS1 form. What are the requirements? This is contained in Section 18B. No title insurance company, independent escrowee, or other title insurance agent may issue a title insurance policy to or provide services to an applicant if it knows or has reason to believe that the applicant was referred to it by any producer of title business or by any associate of such producer, where the producer, the associate, or both have a financial interest in the title insurance company, independent escrowee, or title insurance agent to which the business is referred, unless the producer has disclosed to any party paying for the product or services or his representative the financial interest of the producer of the title business or associate referring the title business, and a disclosure of an estimate of those charges to be paid as described in Section 19. What is required to be disclosed? Again, referring back to Section 18B, the producer has disclosed to any party paying for the products or services or his representative the financial interest of the producer of title business or associate referring the title business, and a disclosure of an estimate of those charges to be paid as described in Section 19. When does the DS1 form need to be delivered? Again, Section 18B. Such disclosure must be made in writing on forms prescribed by the Secretary prior to the time that the commitment for title insurance is issued. What does prior to the time that the commitment for title insurance is issued mean? Unfortunately, there's no statutory definition or guidance. As a best practice, and until there is further written guidance from the IDFPR, I would wait at least 24 hours after delivering the disclosure to issue the commitment to the parties. Again, that is just a best practice. There is no statutory definition, and there is currently no guidance. So as a best practice, again, I would not issue a commitment to the parties until 24 hours has elapsed since you've delivered the disclosure to the parties or their representatives. How long must the producer agent signed and dated DS1 be retained? Again, Section 18B, the title insurance company, independent escrowee, or title insurance agent shall retain the disclosure form for a period of 3 years. So again, all of that information is contained in Section 18. Now I'd like to move on to the current disclosure form. Kevin, if you could move up to that, thank you. So this is the new promulgated DS1 form effective March 1. I will point out the differences in the new form and some of the areas, again, that are new. With regard to the first section, transaction information, some of this is self-explanatory: property address, buyer, borrower's name, seller's name. The next 3 sections are new: title agent name, address, registration number, escrow service provider name, license number, title insurance company name, and license number. So the title agent name, that will be you as the title agent, how you are registered as an agent for Fidelity. Each agent is issued a registration number with each underwriter that you are registered with. We hope that you will place all of your title orders with Fidelity, but we understand that you may be registered with other underwriters. You need to obtain your registration number for each underwriter that you are registered with and make sure you are using the appropriate registration number for the underwriter that you are working with. That information can be obtained from the IDFPR website or contact your sales executive to have them help you with that information. The escrow service provider, when you are working with Fidelity, that will be Fidelity Title Company LLC with our registration number, and the title insurance company will be Fidelity National Title Insurance Company. Again, keep in mind, if you are working with other companies, their registration information will be different. So if you are pre-populating this form, make sure you are using the appropriate form for the entity that you are registered with. The next section, important consumer information. Please read through this. Fairly self-explanatory information for consumers in the transaction, but please familiarize yourself with that information. Next section is the estimated seller and buyer title and escrow charges. Here you will include the cost of the owner's policy, cost of the loan policy. Endorsements are not included. When you are working with Fidelity, we will also include the commitment update fee, policy update fee, and chain of title at line 3, and our escrow charges at line 5. There was some question whether endorsements were or were not to be included. The department has clarified that endorsements are not included on this estimated form. So line 1 will be the cost of the owner's policy, no endorsements. Line 2 will be the cost of the loan policy, no endorsements. Again, if you are working with another provider, and again, we hope that you are using us 100% of the time, keep in mind that if you are working with a provider and they are charging the consumer a title examination fee or a search fee, again, directly to the consumer, those items should be included on the form also. The next section, and this is probably the newest section on the form, relates to the producer identifying either the percentage or dollar amount that they're receiving of the owner's policy premium and the percentage or dollar amount of the loan policy premium. Again, the name of the producer will be the title agent, and you will input either the percentage or the dollar amount of the owner's policy premium and the percentage or dollar amount of the loan policy premium. There was some question whether that was to include both the percentage and the dollar amount. It is percentage or dollar amount. So again, one of those does need to be included. Moving on to the certification of disclosure, the producer will input their name. If you are also acting as the title agent, which you will be when you are working with Fidelity, the box that says "and as title agent" needs to be checked. The producer needs to sign and date the form. The form can be signed digitally or electronically. It can also be signed in a fashion / agent's name and date. Again, to keep items consistent, I would date that form the date that you are delivering it to all of the parties, sellers, buyers, or buyer's attorney. And we'll go on just in a little bit, talk a little bit more about the fashion of delivery. But again, that section does need to be completed, signed digitally or electronically, and dated. Next section is the acknowledgement section. Signature lines for sellers and buyers. I will note that there is no requirement that the sellers or buyers sign the form. The requirement is that the form is delivered to the parties prior to issuance of the commitment. That is the key. You may get signed forms back, retain those for your records, but you do not have to seek out signatures. If the parties haven't signed, you don't have to remind them to sign it. Again, if you do get the signed forms back, retain those for your records, but there's no statutory requirement that that acknowledgement be signed. Again, the requirement is delivery of the disclosures to the parties prior to the commitment being issued. I will cover the instructions, and again, this is going to correlate to the form. So again, of note on the instructions, page 2 of the instructions indicate when you're filling out that section below the title charges that you fill in the dollar amount or percentage for both the owner's policy and loan policy. With regard to, again, the certification of disclosure, the signature of the producer is required. That can be done digitally or electronically or typewritten /s/ and then the signed disclosure has to be forwarded to the parties prior to the time of the issuance of the title commitment. The instructions also refer to the producer retaining the evidence of delivery. So this is a new requirement. So however you are delivering that form to your sellers, buyers, or buyer's attorney, presumption is it's going to be by email, that you retain a copy of that email documenting that you've delivered that disclosure prior to the time that the commitment is issued. A couple of other points on the instructions. If there is a bifurcated transaction, one agent is issuing the loan policy, another agent is issuing the owner's policy, two disclosures are required. So one from each of those parties. Additionally, there may be other situations in which you're involved that may require someone else in the transaction to provide a disclosure. So if there is a realtor affiliated entity or a lender affiliated entity, and they are also referring back to an entity in the transaction, two disclosures may be required. One for you and your referral to your title agency, and then another one for another entity involved in the transaction. Again, as noted, new requirement, and you want to make sure that you have a process in place for documenting that you've delivered the disclosure and that you've delivered it prior to issuing the commitment. Again, as a best practice and a general rule, I would not issue a commitment sooner than 24 hours after having issued the disclosure. Again, the purpose of the disclosure is to provide the consumers an opportunity to review the charges and make a determination if they want to continue with the entity that's being that you're referring them to, or shop around and potentially find other title and escrow providers. So you want to make sure that you're giving that sufficient amount of time. Another distinction, and again, the producer agent is required to retain the actual signed disclosure also for a period of 3 years. So you want to make sure that you're retaining that documentation for a period of 3 years. Additionally, the department is interpreting the statute to indicate that a producer-involved transaction can't proceed unless this disclosure has been given and given timely. By delivering that, retaining a copy of that, that is documenting that everybody in the transaction can proceed. So again, producer signed disclosure retained for 3 years, and the documentation that you've delivered it to the parties retained for 3 years. Kevin, that's all I have on the disclosure and the instructions.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, for that. Appreciate that. Now we kind of want to take over to the presentation. We kind of want to go through kind of Fidelity's processes on the DS1 form and kind of how you can leverage some of the technology that we're building in through Fidelity Desktop to be able to deliver this DS1 disclosure to the parties. Real fast before I get into that, just some housekeeping. The handout section, we know that those links were dead at the start of the presentation. We just want to let you know those are back and reactive again. So if you want to go ahead and click those handouts, they should be active again for you guys. All right, so the first thing we want to go over is talking about a new order and when the new order is placed. So as you're going through Fidelity Desktop and you're kind of going through the screens of the order placement process, you will notice that we made some slight changes to kind of stand out some of the information that we're looking for. So for the sellers in the sellers section, you can note that we're looking for their email and their phone number. Now, their email address will obviously be the one that is delivered the DS1 form to. So anytime that you guys do provide us the email address to the seller, when you're done with your order placement, a lot of you might be familiar with the thank you for your order, here's your order number email. You're going to get a secondary email that is going to have a copy of the DS1 disclosure. That will go out to, again, to the parties that you choose for it to go out to. And we'll kind of show you how to do that here in a couple screens. So the next section is kind of like the listing agent, the buyer's section, the selling agent, who's the buyer's realtor, the buyer's attorney, and the lender. Again, during the order placement process, guys, we really want as much information from the contract that has been provided to you. So I know sometimes these realtors might not fill out on the offers all the correct buyer information, all the correct email addresses for these people and their phone numbers. But we're encouraging you to have conversations with them, as our sales team does, to complete that, complete those multi-boards and complete those contracts with as much information as possible, so then you guys can place those orders with and giving us as much information as possible. We also ask for the buyer's email address. That's not necessarily because we're automatically going to send the buyer the DS1 form. That's not why it's formed. We do ask for that, though, so we can start our in-here process that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with on the call. So we can kind of send out that digital opening package to the buyer at the start of the transaction so they can start obtaining wire and instructions in a secure environment, so we don't have any issues there. So again, guys, as you're placing the order, please provide as much information as absolutely possible. Based on the information that you guys do provide in the order entry screen, on our product delivery screen, which is one of the very last screens right before you submit your request for your order or your search package, you'll see we kind of have this little attorney section that's right up here at top. It's going to say, it'll have a drop-down menu and it says select name of title producer. Okay, I would say the vast majority of you guys, you already have some people in that drop-down. Keep in mind, whoever you select in that drop-down menu, we will complete the DS1 form as that person as the title producer. So if you select as from the drop-down Kevin Giltmeyer will look like he is the one that was the title producer on the DS1 form that will be electronically signed by Kevin Giltmeyer and sent out to the parties. So that's very important to keep that in mind. Sometimes we get secretaries' names and things like that in that drop-down box. We're going to try to clean that up on our end as well. But on your end, please just keep in mind that you always want to select the name of the title producer when you're actually filling out the order form and completing it on our fidelitydesktop.com. So as you can see, the next section of this screen is the disclosure of financial interest form. This is who it's actually going to be sent out to. We automatically default to send it out to the seller's email and the buyer's attorney's email. Now, again, that is only defaulted to what if we got that information in that previous screen. So we understand that you might run into a situation where maybe that buyer is not represented. Maybe they're not having an attorney and you want to send it to the realtor or the selling agent, right? The buyer's realtor, because you don't want to communicate maybe directly with them. So you do have the option then to select that selling agent's email as well. You also have the option to select the buyer's email address directly. So maybe in like a for sale by owner situation where the buyer is completely unrepresented, doesn't have a realtor they're working with, is choosing foolishly not to have an attorney represent them in the transaction, you do have the ability to select the actual buyer and send the disclosure out directly to the buyer. So just kind of keep that in mind while you're going through our screens. The next one is the title product delivery screen. That's basically more so for the internal, for the attorney agent. You know, internally, who do you want to be copied on when the title commitment or the search package is ready, something like that. So keep that in mind in the title product delivery area. That is different than the disclosure of financial interest form area. So those people will be copied on different emails as you kind of select. So just while you're filling out the order form, again, recap as much information as possible, and then you will have the ability to choose who, with the information that you provided, you want sent the DS1 form to. So when we complete the DS1 form, we're going to complete this form, guys, for you completely. So we will be entering in the property address, the buyer's name, the seller's name, the title agent name, and the registration number. I see some questions have come in about that registration number. We already have a list of all your guys' registration numbers, and we will be populating them into our databases. So as we create these forms and you're leveraging Fidelity Desktop to send out your disclosure, have peace of mind that we will have your registration number for you, along with the escrow service and the title insurance company name and license number. That's going to be our information here at Fidelity, since we are the title insurance company and the escrow settlement service provider. Patrick touched on a little bit in the previous conversation earlier in the presentation about the charges and what is going to go on in which particular lines. Again, charge box number 1, we're going to complete all these for you guys. So you don't have to worry about what's going on where, or make sure that you're putting in the right amounts in the right fields. We're going to have that kind of auto-populated for you guys, so it's nice and easy for you. In terms of the percentage or the dollar amount section that's right below that, we've made the determination with some market feedback that we're just going to go with the percentage amount, and we're going to provide that percentage amount of the owner's premium and the loan premium for you. The certificate of disclosure, the undersigned, again, going back to that attorney screen and choosing who the title producer is. That's why that is so important, because that name will be dropped on that line. The title agent box will be checked, and that producer's signature will also be listed electronically, as Patrick indicated is okay, right on that line with the date that we send that form out to them. So again, it can be completely automated for you as long as you give us as much information as possible during the order placement process. Now, another real life scenario is, what if I don't have all the contact information at the time of order placement, right? That happens all the time. As we were just talking about, sometimes these contracts come over and they're not completely filled out with all the buyers, email address or buyer's attorney. Maybe the buyer hasn't selected their attorney yet, something like that. So we kind of thought about that and said, well, we need to be able to have a device for you guys to be able to go back in even after order placement and then resend out this DS1 form. So you're actually going to be able to do that, again, by going to Fidelity Desktop and using the View My Order screen. These are renderings, guys, of how it's going to look once the product is live on March 1st. So keep in mind, things might be changed just a little bit, but just for right now, we're kind of giving you an idea of what it's going to look like. That's what would change, maybe exactly the flow of the buttons. But as you can see, we have this little DS1 button that's right here under the change request column. So this DS1 button, you'll be able to select and click on that button after the order placement to be able to resend out the DS1. So this is kind of how that form is going to look after you click that button, how that page will look. So you'll be able to choose and edit, different phones and email addresses for the particular parties within the transaction. After you're done editing all that information on what's needed, you'll be able to click the submit button, and then that DS1 form will be sent back out directly to who you have updated within this contact screen. So if you have the information during the order placement process, wonderful. That's probably the best time to give it to us. We will take it and make sure we send out that DS1 form. And guys, as you place these orders, that DS1 form will be triggered to be sent out within 5 minutes of you placing your order. So our automation will pick up, give the file an order number, assign the proper fees based off of the sales price that you entered in the order placement process, and then send out that DS1 form completed for you. But if you don't have the information at the time of order placement process, no problem. You can come here and enter more. There has been some discussion on how many disclosures do I need to send out. If a buyer was added to the transaction, maybe a wife is now being added to the transaction after the initial disclosure went out, do I have to redisclose? You don't necessarily have to if they're related parties, meaning a husband and wife, something like that. But if they're two completely different sellers, two completely different buyers, unrelated, just two individuals going in on title, then we should probably send out a DS1 form to each specific person in that transaction. So keep that in mind as well as you guys are delivering these DS1 forms. Another scenario, real life scenario that we've thought of is, what if the commitment is done, but the first deal falls through and we receive a contract with a new buyer? How am I going to handle that as the title agent, right? I've already sent out my disclosure. I've already placed my order. Now I have a new buyer, but I already have my commitment. Well, we caution you, do not send that commitment out until you disclose, right? And we are able to do that, again, by leveraging Fidelity Desktop. A lot of you may be familiar with the Schedule A change feature under the View My Order screen in the Request Change column of Fidelity Desktop. So title agents, you guys, if you get a new buyer, in a new contract, you have a new lender, a new selling agent, all that information, you will be able to go into Fidelity Desktop and completely update that title commitment yourself. So you as the title agent will have the power to kind of create a brand new commitment for you. So what you could do is you could come in here, change the sales price if you need to. You also, just real quick up top, you do have the ability to change it from a loan to a cash, or a cash to a loan, depending on the contract. You can come in here, change your purchase price. You can update your buyer's name, and you can see we have little trash cans here. So you'll be able to trash out and kind of throw away, if you will, the old buyers who are no longer purchasing, and add those new buyers in. We also have the option for you to add the new lender information in. The listing agent, typically these don't change per contract, but in case for some reason it did, you will have the option to change the listing agent. Selling agent, the same thing. You'll have the option to put the new buyer's realtor information in. And again, most importantly, adding that new buyer's attorney information in as well. When you click submit on this screen, again, it will go out to the parties that we've kind of defaulted, which is the sellers and the buyer's attorney. So those are the default ones when you have the change of the title commitment, where you're having a completely brand new party kind of coming in. If for some reason you have to go back and then this particular new buyer is now completely unrepresented, you can still make the change in Schedule A to update the title documents, and then you can use your DS1 button to then choose who you specifically want to be able to send that DS1 disclosure out to. So just to recap, we have the ability to send out the DS1 disclosure to the parties in the transaction at the time of order placement, after the order has been entered, but before the title commitment has been issued, and then as well as when you have a completely new buyer and you need to update and have a completely new commitment created. We don't open up new orders for that at Fidelity. We simply remove the old people in the transaction, update it to the new parties in the transaction, and then we can send out that disclosure. When you do use the Schedule A change feature, you're going to get, again, back 2 different emails. One email, and the first email that you will get back will be the DS1 form with the new party's information on it. The second email you will get will be an updated email with the updated title documents. So it will have a new title commitment in there. It'll have a new CPL. It'll have a new, preliminary closing disclosure. All those types of things that you're used to seeing in kind of our title commitment bundles that we send out. Some of you might have a question of how am I going to provide proof that the DS1 was sent to the appropriate parties? Again, we have that solution built in for you directly through Fidelity Desktop, as long as you're leveraging our technology to send out the DS1 form. Within that DS1 button, you will actually be able to have a little section on here which will tell you when the disclosure was sent out, what day it was sent out to, and then what email addresses it was actually sent out to. You will also then have the ability to re-download if you wanted to look at what form actually went out to the parties. You'll be able to download that form here as well, so you'll be able to see and track exactly who was delivered the form to. We feel that this will be proof enough delivery with the state of Illinois saying that, yes, that I actually did send the form out, and here's my proof by logging into Fidelity Desktop and showing them this screen. If for some reason we ever get into a discovery process where we actually need to pull logs from Fidelity Desktop, that's all possible. We can do that, ladies and gentlemen. So feel free that we will be able to prove that these emails did go out if ever needed. Also, in the View My Order section, a lot of you are used to going to this View Documents button that's under here under the Documents column. Typically, what lives in this button is the search package and then the title commitment once we get the examination back. We're also going to automatically be uploading now the latest disclosure of financial interest DS1 form. So again, it will be available to you in the DS1 button as well as the View My Documents button. As you can see, it's going to be listed right there. These are links directly to our cloud storage, so those items will be available for you well past the 3 years that the state is requiring. None of these documents will expire on our website. They'll always be there and available for you. Those links will not expire. So that's kind of the process of exactly how Fidelity will deliver and help you guys leverage our technology to get the DS1 form in the appropriate party's hands. So for now, I will turn the call over to DJ and Patrick to kind of run through some questions and answers that have since come in.
Thank you, Kev. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's get into some of these questions. The question board has been very active. I've been trying to stay up on some of the more pertinent questions and some of the questions that have been repeated the most often. And let's dive into these a little bit. So, all right, first question, Patrick. What if an additional buyer is added to the contract later on? So same contract, new buyer. Should a new DS1 form be issued?
In that situation, if a new buyer is added, best practice would be, and I should say a new unrelated buyer is added, best practice should be to issue a disclosure to that buyer.
Okay, thank you. Moving to the next question. The question came up, is it always the same percentage for the OP and the LP that you disclose? We're going to take care of that situation for you by producing this through Fidelity Desktop. We're going to be populating it with your IDFPR license numbers, your contracts. All of that will flow appropriately, so you won't need to worry about that portion. Specific transactional question. If the appraisal comes in low and the purchase price changes, which changes the title fees, buyers are the same. Does a new DS1 form need to be disclosed?
No. This is an estimate at the time that the searches are placed. So that transactional information changing doesn't require a new disclosure.
following up on that question, it's almost a caveat because it came up a few times. So same scenario, but disclosure happened, but for whatever reason pertaining to a particular deal, the title fees have been discounted. Does a new disclosure need to go out?
No, no. Again, disclosing at the initial stage the estimate based on that information at the time that that search information is placed. So no redisclosure there.
Okay. This question came up a few times. Where do I get my title insurance license number? And is there a separate license number for each title company? A couple points on that one. Again, we'll be populating it. If you're an attorney agent of Fidelity, we'll be populating it to that form. Okay, so you shouldn't have to worry about that in that instance if we're populating it. And then you can receive your license number if you go to the IDFPR website under title insurance agents. And there is a separate title insurance, there is a separate registration number, license number for each underwriter.
So there, let's say I was registered with 4 underwriters. I would have 4 separate registration numbers. So when you go to, if you want to look up yours, go to www.idfpr.gov and go to the title insurance section, and then there is a underwriter and agent lookup section. So you would type in your name and it will pull up all underwriters that you are registered with. And that will give you, agents are registered. It will say, just a caveat, it will say license number on there. Agents are registered, it's a registration number, but the website refers to a license number. That is your registration number. And then each underwriter has their own license number. So when you are registered with a particular underwriter, your license number is TA title agent, the digits for the underwriter, and then your unique registration number. That unique registration number is not the same for every underwriter that you are registered with. It's different.
Okay, thank you. Another question came up is so on the DS1 form, it references the escrow service provider license number and title insurance license number. You somewhat answered that question right there. And also Barry Wolfenson was in the chat also. We do have different license numbers for the escrow service provider and the title insurance license number. I know that was in that chat. Again, we will be populating that form through Fidelity Desktop with those numbers so that they're populated correctly. And if you need those numbers because you plan on disclosing yourself, that's fine. You can reach out to your title, you reach out to your Fidelity title representative or send an email over to ilsales@fnf.com and we can help you. Let's go to, can the attorney sign the disclosure form for their clients? So I'm assuming this would be the situation of the seller's attorney wanting to sign the disclosure for their clients.
No. When an attorney agent is representing the sellers in the transaction, it is best practice that that disclosure go directly to those sellers. So again, your delivery documentation showing that you've sent it directly to your sellers. If you have a power of attorney for your sellers, theoretically you could sign it. Again, it does not, the statute does not mandate that the acknowledgement section be signed. But again, you must deliver that to the sellers. Delivery to yourself is not sufficient.
Okay. This question came up a few times regarding fees in multiple fashions. I'm going to address this twofold. So one question came up to where do we put ancillary fees and what bucket are those fees supposed to fall into? Again, we are going to have this form populated with the fees dropping into the proper buckets by the time March 1st comes around. So we will have that set up as long as you are placing that through Fidelity Desktop and the form is being generated by us. The other question that came up is why would we include all of the ancillary fees, including the escrow fees, when Fidelity is solely retaining those fees? The answer to that question is they're looking for a full disclosure of the title invoice in addition to the financial interest. All right, moving right along. Okay, this question came up a few times. Does delivery to the buyer's attorney or buyer's real estate agent cover delivery to the buyer, especially in circumstances where the buyer does not have an email address?
You can also deliver by U.S. mail. Obviously, delivery to buyer's attorney would be the preferred method. If there is no other information for the buyer, again, the statute says sellers, buyers, or their representatives. A real estate agent could be a representative for the buyer. And again, that's, best case scenario if you've got no other contact information or no contact information for the preferred method, which would be the buyer's attorney.
And just to recap some of Kevin's presentation is that when you're going through an order on Fidelity Desktop, that final screen is going to automatically populate with the buyer's attorney's email address, the seller's email address, as long as they're provided. It will also pull through the other agent's email addresses, including the selling agent's email address, if you would like to include them. So in those situations where you may not have a buyer, we're trying to think ahead of this for you. So in those situations where the buyer may not have representation or may not have an email address, and they may only have a selling agent or whatever situation there is, there's going to be the opportunity to disclose to the proper person when it calls for that, the screen that Kev's got up right now. So what you're going to see here is that as you're inputting that information on the order contact screen, we're going to automatically pull over those sellers' email addresses and the buyer's attorney. They're going to come through automatically checked. So no matter what, once you complete the order, if those parties' contact information are present, the DS1 disclosure is going to go out directly to them. If you would like to further disclose to the other individuals that we have shown here, the selling agent and the buyer directly, you can choose to do that, but you don't need to. In addition to that, if any of these email addresses are not provided at the time of order entry, we're only going to pull through the email addresses that were. So in the event nothing's provided, that DS1 is just going to come back directly to the seller's attorney, and then you can choose what to do with it at that point as the agent. Okay, so that covers this. Does the DS1 need to be maintained for 3 years in hard copy form, or can it be stored electronically?
It can be stored electronically.
Okay. Can also be signed electronically.
Correct. And just as a little bit of a distinction, because I know Kevin pointed this out on the system. Retention of the producer signed and dated disclosure, again, 3-year retention period. Documentation of delivery for the signed and dated DS1, 3 years. Other title related documents have a 7-year retention period. So I just wanted to make that distinction. So the signed and dated DS1 form and the documentation of delivery, 3-year retention period.
Okay, the question has come up a few times in the chat also about how is this form going to go directly out from Fidelity Desktop if it requires a signature first. We're going to be affixing a digital signature to that form. So that question I've seen a few times in here. That is the answer to that. Again, utilizing Fidelity Desktop for this is going to solve a lot of problems through this, especially when we get into, existing contract falls through new buyer comes in, and then you can go back into Schedule A change, make those Schedule A change on the title commitment, which is automatically going to send out that new DS1 to those new parties before the title commitment gets returned to you. So we're trying to make sure that everything follows exactly what the state is looking for, and also providing some automation behind it.
And again, the instructions from the department clearly state that the form can be signed electronically. So it can be signed digitally. Again, if you're not using this system to create a form, then it would be wet ink signed, conceivably.
All right, will the DS1 be sent by Fidelity prior to issuing the title commitment? I believe we've addressed this, but I've seen it a handful of times, so I'm just going to cover this one more time real quick. Ordering through Fidelity Desktop, if you go through our regular channels of placing an order, all right, as soon as you're completing that order, you're going to have the option to send that DS1 out at completion of the order. If you do not, and you just want that DS1 to come back directly to you, you can do that. But that is going to happen as soon as that order number is generated, before you ever even receive a search package on our regular place and order function. So you're going to be far in advance of any title commitment. Now, if you're placing an FX order, same functions apply. You're going to have the option to deliver that DS1 at the time of order completion. However, if you do have that returned directly to you, that since you're doing the exam at the same time that you're doing the order, that DS1 is going to come back to you with the order number, still 24 to 48 hours, sometimes 72 hours before that title commitment is ever issued. So you're still well in advance of that. And again, you just need to be showing the proof of delivery to those parties. This one I hadn't seen, Patrick. So can you send one DS1 with buyer side only charges to the buyer and a separate DS1 to the seller side with only seller side charges?
It's a good question, and I don't know that there is a concrete answer. Certainly that can be done. There's no prohibition. There's nothing in the statute that says one form has to go to all parties. It's conceivable. I think the standard practice has been that that form include all the information for all the parties, and that same form then is going to all the parties.
Okay. Is there ever a situation where multiple parties in the transaction will need to disclose?
There may be situations. So a couple of those would be a bifurcated transaction. So if one producer is referring the owner's policy and another producer is referring the loan policy, each of those producers would need to disclose, 2 disclosures required. There may be other situations where other parties in the transaction are also producers and are referring to entities that they have a financial interest in. So there may be situations, those types of situations where multiple disclosures are required. For you as the title agent, you are required to disclose your interest. You're not required to disclose somebody else's interest, your interest. But again, there could be situations where multiple disclosures are required.
We're going to piggyback on that one. So do you have to disclose to the buyer if clearly the seller is the only party paying for the title insurance?
I would disclose.
I imagine it's a cash deal.
Yeah, I would disclose to all parties. Because that buyer may be paying some charges in that transaction. So again, I would err on the side of caution and disclose to all the parties, all buyers and sellers or their representatives.
Okay. We have a question of, I'll be submitting a new order today or tomorrow with Fidelity. Will the new F&T procedures be active? No, as the form goes live on March 1st, we're not going to be turning this feature on until that point. So we're not going to be producing this until that point.
And just to follow up on that, because I think there are a number of questions. relating to timing and the March 1st effective date. So if you place a request for a search on February 28th, and your normal practice is to deliver the current disclosure form right after you've placed that order and it's February 28th, you would use the existing disclosure form to do that. If you are going to wait a day to provide your disclosure and it's now March 1st, you would use the new disclosure form. So again, any disclosures done after midnight on March 1st require the new disclosure form.
Did I just freeze? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're going in and out. Well, thank you
Can hear me?
guys.
Okay.
Yeah, you're kind of going.
Yeah, no, I apologize for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So thank you guys very much for joining our call today. If there are any questions, please reach out to ilsales@fnf.com. We really appreciate that. We'd like to get some feedback on this and see answer any specific questions that maybe were not addressed throughout the presentation. Additionally, just as another reminder, please download the course evaluation form from the handout section on the GoToMeeting app. If you could please download that form and email that form back to ilsales@fnf.com, that would be wonderful. So again, thank you everybody for joining. We appreciate you jumping on. Hopefully you learned some more. And hopefully, most importantly, we hope to see all of you guys take advantage of the solutions that we have in place on Fidelity Desktop for delivery of the DS1 form. So we thank you guys very much for joining. And please, if you need anything else, ilsales@fnf.com. Thank you all very much and have a great day.